because they kind of go together. I don't know, I'm wearing the same shirt. I just did these two back to back. Health. So I guess I really just have two health issues that have caused me any sort of, or have inhibited me any throughout my bodybuilding career, and that would be asthma and ulcerative colitis. The asthma, not so much. Even as I do these videos, it's actually bothering me just a little bit right now. So there's maybe a couple moments where I'm taking some deep breaths. It's because my asthma is bothering me just a touch at the moment. And when I talk too much, I'm not like taking as many breaths and I get a little bit winded. So it gets me a little bit. It's not exercise induced. I think it's more of like an allergy induced. I've never had any issues with exercise, but I do feel like when it bothers me more, it actually impacts my sleep, and I'm just tired all the time. So that's kind of how that's impacted me. Before I get into ulcerative colitis, I do also have a couple like spinal injuries that I had from wrestling, but again, nothing that's ever impacted me. But I'll just address it real quick since I'm talking about health anyway. I believe so one was diagnosed in an x-ray later, like I don't know how many years later, so I don't know if when I think it happened is when it happened. But I had a chipped vertebrae in, I don't remember which one of my cervical vertebrae, but somewhere in my neck. And there's basically like a chip that broke off and appears to be fused to the vertebrae below it. And the doctor just asked me like, were you in some sort of bad accident? What happened to your neck? My suspicion or theory is that it happened when I was 12 years old, because I wrenched my neck really bad in a wrestling match. I was wrestling in a folk style tournament, and I got suplexed, which is not legal in folk style, so I was completely unprepared for it. Now, I don't think the kid intentionally did it. One, we're 12-year-olds. Two, it was a summer tournament, so in the summer you do freestyle, Greco, and folk style, and it's just like weekend to weekend, which tournament you sign up for. He'd probably just done a freestyle or Greco tournament less than a week earlier, and now he's jumping into folk style, and it was just a moment, it happened, whatever. But there's a video, I wish I could find it. If I ever do, maybe I'll share it on YouTube. There's a video of me getting suplexed, hitting my forehead on the mat, and my shoulders coming down and hitting the mat. So my neck just getting totally, wrenched back. I remember feeling the back of my head hit my back so I got cranked pretty hard. Something that I think if I did today, I'd probably be in a hospital, but luckily I was 12 years old. It hurt like a son of a gun, but I finished the match, won very handily. I was winning pretty handily. I didn't do a whole lot after that, but it was an ego thing for me at the time. Like, I don't want him to get disqualified. I want to finish the match and I want to win because I'm kicking his butt and I want to win. So I did finish the match. I did win, but it might have been worse than I thought it was. My neck was stiff for like a few weeks after that, but it wasn't anything I thought too much of. That's the only thing I can imagine that it could have been, aside from my neck being stiff kind of a lot, and then maybe I get a lot of tightness in my right shoulder. I don't know if that has anything to do with it, because like my neck's always tight, so maybe there's something there, but again, I don't know. It's not anything that I think of as impacting me horribly. Then when I was older, in high school, I had a bulging disc in my lower back, L5-S1. It just hurt all the time, and it wasn't actually until my freshman year of college, just lifting weights with a buddy, that I felt like a shooting pain. And I ended up calling it quits like 5 minutes into the workout, went home, woke up the next morning, and it was horrible. It just kept getting worse. Went back that winter break to wrestle with some guys in my high school, high school I was an alumni of at that point, and then as well as some of the other alumni who came back. And after a wrestling practice, it had just flared up so bad that I couldn't take my shoes off. Like, trying to bend over to take off my wrestling shoes was causing me so much pain that I was I couldn't do it. Like, I couldn't even touch close, even put anyway, I drove home in my wrestling shoes and kind of kicked them off my feet when I got into the house. Anyway, long story short, it was so bad. Had to go to the doctor, got MRIs, found out I had a bulging disc. Doctor said it was between 3.5 to 4 times the size that a disc should normally be, which per him is not the worst he's ever seen, but it was certainly bad enough that it should be cause for concern. Did the physical therapy, and kind of felt like at that time the way it was presented to me was like I was never going to do another contact sport or lift weights or do any of these things again. I was going to be a wuss for the rest of my life, was how 19-year-old me felt about it. Obviously by that summer I was starting to train for my first bodybuilding competition, so that didn't stay with me forever, but it did stay with me. And I was in pain all the time too, even doing the physical therapy. Like my back always hurt, felt like an old man. It stunk. I was drying my feet off by whipping them with the towel because it hurt too much to, get down there. Even over the first few months of physical therapy, trying to tie my shoes, I'd break a sweat because I was in so much pain. Like, it sucked. But the bodybuilding actually, it strengthened everything up so much that I can deadlift heavy, squat heavy, do heavy overhead presses, all these things now, and there's no issues. Even if I grind out an ugly rep on deadlifts with, a darn near maximal amount of weight for me, my back still feels fine the next day. I did for any who do watch my YouTube stuff, I did that 405 pound by 405 rep attempt on deadlifts. And my back felt, obviously I was sore, but it was more glutes and hamstrings that were sore. Like, I was fine. So everything's really good with that now, but that was something that for a while was bothering me and would flare up a little bit if I wasn't careful with my different lifts. So there's a lot of very isolated movements in the beginning. But the biggest thing has been my gut. So I got diagnosed with ulcerative colitis when I was 26. I first started having some issues with it when I was 25. And it was actually, I got pneumonia training for a competition at that point too. And it was the pneumonia that I was more focused on, I guess. I was having some bleeding when I was going to the bathroom, but I also couldn't breathe, and I was on all these inhalers and other things, and it was horrible. And then after the heavy round of antibiotics, all of the symptoms of the colitis went completely away for almost a year. So I just attributed it to, oh, well, I was just so sick, my whole body was falling apart. No worries, I'm good now. And then when I started having those symptoms again, obviously that was pretty frustrating. Going back into the doctor, in and out, end up finding out after a few various different doctor's appointments and then a flexible sigmoidoscopy, which, by the way, they claim is a non-invasive, so they don't put you under for it. But it's sticking a camera up to through your sigmoid colon, so you're getting up to about here, which if you think about coming up from your backside, that's, to me, it felt pretty invasive, we'll just say that. Actually, I felt like after the doctor was like, oh, it's non-invasive, it's no big deal. I'm like, I feel like you should have to undergo this before you start saying that to people. At least prep them a little bit. We're like, hey, this is going to be pretty uncomfortable. We're putting about 1.5 2 feet of camera up your butt. Anyway, I apologize for that. That's just my feelings on it. So initially it was just taking my controller drugs, and that really seemed to manage everything just fine. Had my first bad flare-up when I was 27, 28, something like that. I think a little bit after I turned 28. So it was December of 2013, and then, going into 2014, beginning of 2014. Came back from that. I think I didn't have, what are my notes here? So I didn't have another colitis flare-up until the winter of 2017. So no issues, and actually came off medications for the bulk of that time after that flare-up, because I decided, well, if I got sick, had this flare-up while I was on medication, then the medication isn't enough, and I need to focus more on addressing the issue. So I did a lot with, an old friend of mine that, we had dated for a while. She helped me out with my diet and all this, and we did an elimination diet, kind of figured out trigger foods, and then just some intuitive eating, yada yada. Found something that seemed to work pretty well for me. So I was actually not on any pharmaceuticals or anything for my colitis for a long time. And then after opening up the store, we've been open for about a year, a little over a year, and having my first employee, and then just some of the stresses with there's a secondary business that I was also with my business partner we were trying to run, and so the employees with that and just lots of headache and stress and frustration, had my first colitis flare up in years. I also, just through being busy and stressed and working 60 to 70 hours a week, I was falling back into some habits that were just more convenient eating. Now, this wasn't eating bad food. It was still preparing meals, but preparing meals that were more convenient for me, and things that, falling into some of the foods that had given me problems. And doing some of the things that I also felt had given me some problems, like preparing food in bulk and eating it for several days instead of making my food fresh daily. So the little things that I had found helped me out, I got away from because it wasn't inconvenient and I was busy and I was just kind of, trying to make life easy for myself, and instead made life hard for myself for that colitis flare up. A year later, I had another colitis flare up. So that was, this one was a bit worse. That was 2018 into 2019. And at that point, that had been my worst one. It was my first time falling underneath 180 pounds. I got down to, I think, 176, 177. So that was the lightest I had been in like my adult life. Since I quit wrestling, basically, I'd never been so light. And bouncing back from that, I remember that was when I'm like, all right, I need to get my diet back in check. I needed to do all these other things for my gut health, everything else like my smoothies and kefir and all these other things that I felt had helped me out a lot. I need to avoid these foods. I need to focus on these foods. I need to make my food fresh daily. All this stuff to help myself. And I'd been doing a really good job of it until last spring. Again, I think I hadn't had any issues in a while, getting a little bit more bold. Started doing a lot of chicken again, which I usually don't eat at all. Started doing the, prepping things in bulk. Not a lot, but just even a little bit here and there. And had another issue, my last colitis flare-up, which was probably my worst ever. I didn't lose the most amount of weight, but it was the least manageable. All of the different drugs that they were trying weren't seeming to help. I was getting pretty desperate. It lasted for like 4 months. And now I wasn't willing to go on some of the like biologics and things like that. I just felt like I needed to figure this out without. My colitis has never been so bad that I'm going to be like hospitalized. I lose a lot of weight. I don't feel well. I'm fatigued. I'm going to the bathroom all the time. There's a lot of bleeding, that kind of stuff. So anyway, I ended up getting it under control, I believe, truly, by starting doing Wim Hof breathing. Now, I was listening to a Joe Rogan podcast where they're talking about like robots. And it was a roboticist who worked for Boston Robotics, I think. And somehow or another, they start talking about this guy, Wim Hof, and I'm just so interested in what they're talking about. And I'm like, all right, screw this podcast. I need to learn more about this Wim Hof dude. Start, reading a little bit about his breathing technique. Go to YouTube at this point. Find he's got videos up on his page of just little guided breathing sessions, only 11 minutes long. So I try one, sitting in a parking lot, about ready to go into a meeting. And for the first time ever, after doing this little 11-minute breathing thing, for the first time in months, not ever, for the first time in months, I had no pain, no discomfort. So at that point I decided, well, I'm going to keep doing this, because even if it just helps with my pain, that's enough. Just to be able to make it through the day without being in this chronic discomfort, that would be enough. Even if my other symptoms are still there, like the frequency, going to the bathroom, the bleeding and everything else, the managing the pain would be enough for that alone is worth it. So I kept doing it 2-3 times a day. And 2 days later, all the bleeding stopped. It was 4 or 5 days, and I had 0 symptoms anymore. Now at this point, because a lot of the other drugs that they had been trying to use weren't working for me, I actually pulled back and I wasn't using anything besides my controller drug. So valsalzide disodium, but no prednisone, no mesalamine enemas, Those are the other two that I had tried in the past that had normally helped. They were doing nothing for me, so I just stopped. Because the enemas are miserable and prednisone makes you feel miserable. So if it wasn't going to do anything, I wasn't going to use it. So I was just on the controller drug, and I started doing the breathing, and within a few days of 4 months long of like no relief ever, nothing I did was causing me any relief at all. Like none of the other stuff was doing anything for me, and all of a sudden, boom, like I'm good. I've had a few times since then where I'll go a couple days just being lazy without doing the breathing, and I start getting some issues. Every single time I get back to doing my breathing, morning and evening, again, I'm talking about a little over 10 minutes in the morning and evening. Wake up, first thing I do when I wake up is I just pull out my phone. I have the page loaded all the time. Just reload the page, do the guided breathing, and then I get up and start my day. And then before bed every night, I do a guided breathing session again and go to bed. So it's not a huge time commitment. I've noticed awesome benefits from it. So I'm just throwing this out there because it's been, I believe, very beneficial to me. And anybody who's having issues with any sort of gut health stuff, I'm sure it could help with maybe other things. But for me personally, like, I think it's helped a lot with the gut health. And I would advocate, because it doesn't cost any money. It's not even a big time commitment. You can do it by yourself. Go to YouTube, check out Wim Hof, and try it out. So he's not paying me for that. It's helped me out so much. I truly believe it has. And yeah. So anyway, the last thing on the health note is, so I decided to, because I've always been interested in what my testosterone levels were. And I've always kind of assumed that because I'm pretty strong and because I've been able to develop a pretty good physique and I eat well and I don't drink, I exercise all the time, that I would have these like pretty hardy testosterone levels, but I've never known what they were. I wish I would have got them checked when I was young and healthy and before I had any of the colitis issues, but I didn't. I got them checked for the first time, last year. And you know what? I'm actually going to make this a separate video because this one could be a little bit long. But anyway, I'm going to talk a little bit about my testosterone because this was interesting for me. So I'm going to go ahead and just do that one right now too. Be right back.